The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Thank you for coming to the Project Entertainment Network store. Please place your order. A good choice. A t-shirt for the horror show with Brian Keene. Amanda Method coffee mug. There's more. A Necrocastic on hoodie. That's sharp. But why on earth would you want bizonged leggings? Wait, are you Mr. Frank? The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with goodies from all your favorite podcasts. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs and more. www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again, true believers, to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden. And Brian, I say the ultimate 70s Excelsior to you today.
Ultimate groovy 70s Excelsior.
I also have to say it's nice to be back with the floppies for this era because we get to see some fantastic ads from Marvel Comics in the 70s.
Yeah.
Including, and I'm just going to bring this up first because it's the best part of today's show. I know I brought it up before on the show, but the back page ad of Black Goliath #1 is for the greatest toy any child of the 70s ever had. And I bought one. They were still selling it for my sons when they were little.
Well, now I am reading this online, so I don't have the ads. I'm going to guess.
Go ahead.
That the greatest 70s toy of all time, it's got to be the Evel Knievel stunt cycle, right?
It is the Evel Knievel stunt cycle, the greatest toy of the 1970s. Just the greatest thing ever.
It is. It's the second greatest. The greatest toy of the 1970s was the Star Wars Death Star playset, complete with foam garbage for the little trash compactor on the bottom floor. But yes, the Evel Knievel stunt cycle was the thing that all of us wanted.
Yeah, and the cool thing about the Evel Knievel stunt cycle is that it was so self-contained. Now, in the ad, which is for the further adventures of Evel Knievel, they show that you could get the chopper, the trail bike. There was a Formula One dragster. There was a scramble van that you were able to do like jumps over.
I had the scramble van.
I think I had the scramble van too, but the weird thing is I recall using the scramble van and trying to jump over it.
Yeah.
And then deciding after that the scramble van was not nearly as fun as just playing with the... So for people who don't know what I'm talking about, the stunt cycle, Evel Knievel was on it. The action figure doll of Evel Knievel was on the stunt cycle. And you set it into a plastic base, which you could then crank to wind up to get it going, and then it would release, and it would just, Evel Knievel would ride across your floor, do wheelies, all kinds of stuff.
That's right. If you remember, Marvel at the time had the Mego action figures.
Yep.
And Evel Knievel was the same size as those. My van often doubled as a surveillance van, and Evel Knievel and Conan and Falcon, because the only two Marvel figures I had were Conan and Falcon, would team up and they would hide out in the back of the van and solve crimes.
There you go.
So,
All right. I would pay to watch that show.
Well, I'll tell you, as you said, this week and next week, folks, we're wrapping up the year with a spotlight on Black Goliath. You know him from our coverage of the Defenders. You know him from our coverage of the Champions. Now he steps into the spotlight. But before we do that, Chris, I want to tell you about a listener who is very excited for these two episodes, and that is our dear friend Hank Wagner.
Excellent.
of course, editor, horror historian extraordinaire Hank Wagner. I had the opportunity to visit him at home last week. He wanted to show off his comic book collection to someone else that would appreciate it, and boy, did I. We spent hours looking through his comics. I found out that he listens to us every night. He listens to this show specifically. He just has it on endless loop.
Not every night.
Yeah. What's that?
Every week, not every night. Every night would be a little obsessive.
No, he listens every night. We are what put him to sleep.
That's
he has.
different.
Yeah, he has Defenders dialogue on an endless loop. And so he must account for at least 30 listens a week right there for any advertisers.
We are Hank Wagner's Johnny Carson.
So, Bill Foster, as it tells us inside his own comic, it says, and keep in mind, this is 70s hyperbole. Bill Foster, PhD, a child of the ghetto who has pulled himself up out of the Los Angeles slums to become director of one of the nation's most prestigious research labs, a man whose research has given him the power to instantaneously grow to a height of 15 feet with the strength of a true giant, a man who has become a hero.
Yeah, a couple of interesting things. I got a bit of an echo, so I'm going to turn this down a little bit. A couple of interesting things for me about this issue and about Black Goliath in general. First, at this point, he could only grow to 15 feet, and even that was him perfecting Hank Sim's growth, Pym particles growth, whatever the science was in the 70s, however they described it then. Hank Pym had been Giant Man, he'd been Ant-Man, he'd been Goliath, he'd been Yellow Jacket. Clint Barton, a.k.a. Hawkeye, had been Goliath as well.
Right.
And now Bill Foster takes on his own costumed identity as Black Goliath, which presumably today he'd just be Goliath. And this comic, or this character, it says, was conceived and written by Tony Isabella,
who also conceived and created DC's Black Lightning, another prominent early 70s African-American character.
Yeah, and I don't think Tony gets enough credit in the canon of this sort of Bronze Age classic superhero pantheon of creators. I don't think Tony gets enough credit.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I'm trying to think how to phrase this because I don't want to misstate or have people misunderstand what I'm saying here. He created a lot of prominent characters of color for both DC and Marvel, but unlike a lot of other white creators at the time who were also trying to do good, Tony Isabella's characters sound different. They don't all sound identical. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a world of difference between Luke Cage and Black Goliath in how they're portrayed, as we're going to find out. And a lot of the creators at the time, although they meant well and their heart was in their efforts, it still comes off as white dudes trying to write, a person of color's dialect, particularly for the 70s.
Well, and that I find what I immediately noticed in reading these issues. Now, I read the first 3 so far, and we'll cover 2 and possibly 3 of them today, was that Tony Isabella is writing a guy who was born in Watts in Los Angeles, who came up in what was then, presumably, referred to as the ghetto, but what was a rough neighborhood,
right.
And who became a scientist who is, at this point, a superhero, a professional, and making his way through the world side by side with people like Tony Stark.
Yeah, I mean, you can't understate enough. Tony Stark, at this point in comics history, in Marvel Comics history, Tony Stark trusts Bill Foster probably more than anyone, including Pepper. I mean, he puts Bill in charge of Stark International West.
Right.
He doesn't do that for anybody.
Right.
So,
and I would have liked to have seen the Bill Foster character in Ant-Man and the Wasp be a much, a very different from what he turned out to be. But the one thing I was going to say, following up on what you were saying, is that you get to issue 2, written by Chris Claremont, legendary Marvel writer Chris Claremont, and Chris Claremont is doing exactly what you're talking about. So Isabella introduces Bill Foster, and writes him like a confident. He's having struggles just like every other Marvel character, trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life and world. Which does he want to be a superhero? But he doesn't talk like a stereotypical 1970s, character of color. He doesn't talk like he's one of the punks in a Dirty Harry movie, the way that characters were written at that time. But then you get to Claremont, and all of a sudden, Bill Foster is talking like he's never left that stereotypical world.
Exactly.
And I noticed, and this is a broader conversation, but I noticed that someone must have had a conversation with Claremont about that, because come issue 3, Bill Foster is speaking again like he speaks in the first issue.
Yep. Yeah, I picked up on that as well in reading these.
Yeah, I thought it was
an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, I knew you must have when you were talking about that, because it was jarring reading issue 2 to see that he's got Bill Foster, not able to construct a sentence, basically.
Right. I mean, it's very telling. The first 2 pages of issue 1. Issue 1, by the way, written by Tony Isabella. Art by George Tuska and Vince Coletto on the inks. We don't have to read them verbatim. I will put them up on our YouTube episode, at the Brian Keene YouTube channel. But, just in his silent reverie as he walks through the old neighborhood in Watts, reflecting on how things have changed. And just subtle stuff, like he sees, a soda fountain, an old school 1950s soda fountain where he used to go when he was a kid. And he walks in and, now it's this place for Black Power, the Black Power movement. Just so much subtlety in Isabella's writing that really gives you a sense of this character and place and time. And then, like you said, Claremont comes in with issue 2 and it's, hey, you jive turkey.
Yeah, exactly. It's much more like one would expect from the 70s, and Isabella didn't do that. So props to him, And again, we should also say we're 2 sort of middle-aged white guys who, don't have the experience to dissect the racial implications or cultural implications of this properly. So we're going to read it like comic book fans.
Exactly.
So suffice to say, I loved the sort of almost Twilight Zone-y element of Bill Foster coming upon Pops, the soda fountain that he used to hang out at when he was a kid growing up in the neighborhood. And he goes in to say hi to Pop, but the quote-unquote lovable old coot is nowhere to be found. And then he's set upon by some guys who want to rob him.
Yep. Yeah, 3 guys who, they're out for no good. They go to rob him, and they go to pull his coat off, and they see his costume underneath. And here's an example of Isabella's dialogue. The one mugger is like, "What you done up for, Jack? Some kind of jive costume party?" I know it sounds 70s, but it was the 70s.
Right.
And Bill Foster responds, "Me? I'm just a traveling mystic, boys, and I predict you've just made the biggest mistake of your entire misspent lives." I mean, you can hear Lawrence Fishburne voicing that dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah, right, exactly. Yes. Oh boy, I'd like to see, I hope, I'd like to see more of Bill Foster in modern Marvel comics as well.
Me too.
Anyway, I do like this line when the guy Benny, I think it is, the one of the muggers, gang members, says, "You're not going to do anything rash, are you, brother?" And I love the terror there. But anyway, he makes short work of these guys. And I do like the implication that he says, metaphorically speaking, sometimes you're going to fight fire with fire. And he throws a garbage can at them, which I thought was pretty funny.
Right. We then get, the typical 70s superhero angst. And because this is Black Goliath's first appearance in his own series, we get sort of a recap, of his life growing up. I don't know that we need to touch on all of it because not much of it is going to impact the book here. But two that we do need to touch on, Claire Temple, who was his childhood sweetheart, who he lost because he couldn't be the husband she wanted. In fact, she goes walking off into the sunset with Luke Cage. And sooner or later, we're going to get to Power Man and Iron Fist on this show, so we'll be talking about Claire then. The other prominent one, of course, is, as we mentioned, Tony Stark, the man himself. He gave a young biochemist the big chance, and his trust was amply paid back, this flashback tells us.
No, it was great stuff, and I loved seeing Claire Temple in here, because, of course, those who watched the various Marvel Netflix series know Claire Temple as played by Rosario Dawson.
Exactly.
And I loved seeing her in here.
Yep.
So he gets a phone call from Hank Pym. And again, it's really interesting to me because Hank Pym is a character I always wanted to like, but never really could.
Right.
And
you mean even before the wife beating episode?
Even before we learned that he was an abusive boyfriend / spouse. And beat up Janet on the regular, which we've plastered over that history now.
Right.
Even before that, I just for some reason I could never quite warm up to him. Actually, I think I liked him best when he was Dr. Pym in the West Coast Avengers, the scientist superhero. But that's, I think, one of the reasons I like Bill Foster so much is because he's what my niece Alex would call pure.
Right.
He is who he is. He's brilliant. He's struggling with whether he wants to be a superhero or a scientist, when, of course, we all know he could be both. But so Hank Pym calls. So go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so, Hank sees some news coverage of these muggers hung up in L.A., and he realizes that, Bill Foster must be out running around at night in the superhero underwear. And, Black Goliath tries to deny it. He says, I can't handle two jobs. I'm running Tony Stark's L.A. operation and playing Captain America, especially not now. And then we get an important plot point. He tells Hank Pym that there have been some robberies on all the local laboratories in L.A., and he figures it's just a matter of time before they raid his lab at, Tony Stark's West headquarters. Hank continues to kind of, encourage him to go out and be a superhero. And Black Goliath hangs up the phone, and he's thinking about it. He's thinking about maybe I will, But he's also thinking about himself as a third string Goliath, and I find that interesting.
Yeah. Well, but again, this is the typical, as you said, it's the 70s superhero angst. We see it so often in Hawkeye. We're seeing it here in Bill Foster, struggling with Iceman. So, we see it a lot in this era. But he's trying to decide.
Never see it in, though, in this era?
What's that?
You know who we never see it in this era?
Who's that?
Tony Stark and the Hulk.
Yeah.
They know who they are.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Until Tony gets lost in the bottle.
Well, yeah, but
anyway, so Bill Foster goes into his research and development lab to visit with his quote-unquote whiz kids, the three the three finest inventive minds in his employ. Doctors Herbert Bell, Dale West, and Talia Kuma. Dale West, for those of you who are listening to this, is a red-headed white guy who I will from this point forward just refer to as douche bro.
You know who he reminds me a lot of? Guy Gardner from DC Comics mythology. The loudmouth Green Lantern.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I can see that reminding you of Guy Gardner. Guy Gardner does have some redeeming qualities, and douche bro may be brilliant, but and I wonder, reading this in the 70s, whether or not I would still have bristled at his behavior the way I do. He also reminds me a bit of Flash Thompson.
A little bit like Flash, yes.
Yeah. So, in any case.
Yeah, Isabella introduces them here. They're going to be, the supporting cast, which is what every comic book needs. Unfortunately, because Black Goliath only lasted 5 issues, we never get to know a lot about these cast members other than the douche bro.
Right.
You haven't gotten to issue 4 yet, but he gets a chance to shine. As far as I know, none of these characters really appear after the end of this series. So
yeah, I think that's probably true. Although, again, as you say, douche bro has created a wearable force field jacket,
right,
which is sort of like an armor vest that creates a force field, and we'll see that in action, for better or worse, down the line. But we're introducing them. He is irresponsible and often oversteps and causes accidents in the lab and things like that. But he's allowed to stick around for his brilliance.
Right. So to fast forward a little bit, what Bill Foster feared comes to pass, because that night, just outside his laboratory, he's expecting a shipment of radium, and we see some masked villains outside. They are indeed about to hit his lab, and they are led by the 70s supervillain Atom Smasher.
Not to be confused with the DC character Atom Smasher.
Right.
Yeah. Who I can't help thinking, looking at... So Atom Smasher has power whizzing around his head, so his head looks like an atom. And what are supposed to be electrons apparently are
right,
being carried on these circular, rings of energy around his head. But it makes him look like a Looney Tunes character who just got bumped in the skull. All we need are a couple of little birdies.
You don't have small children anymore, but are you familiar with Teen Titans Go?
Yes.
My son adores that cartoon. Atom Smasher looks like if they put Brainiac on Teen Titans Go. He's drawn that cartoony way.
Yeah. So it's fine. I mean, Atom Smasher is fine. He's apparently made of energy, and he's got some henchmen who look like they came from Henchmen Are Us. They have similar costumes to him, so that they look like they're the low rent C grade versions of Atom Smasher, but they have no powers.
Right.
So basically, they break in and they're trying to steal the radium, and they're met by an unusual welcoming party.
That's right. And I think this is the best page in the issue. It's a full splash page, George Tuska art. And just this whole thing is just masterful. The writing and everything. The caption tells us, "It is dawn in Los Angeles. The man is Bill Foster, and today he has accepted his destiny." And it's Black Goliath staring down at these bad guys.
Yeah, and I love the fact that he's still putting his costume on. He's got one glove on, but the other glove is on top of a crate, and he's yet to slip it on.
Yep.
And he's just kind of like chill and waiting for these guys to attack. And he just says, he introduces himself, and then he says, "I really can't let you have the radium, so the only question left is, are you going to come peacefully?" And then the next panel, he's slipping on his other glove as they scream, "Get him!" and attack.
Yep.
And then we have fight.
Yeah, we get the typical 70s fight that you've heard in almost every episode of the show.
Yeah.
And then we find out that Atom Smasher can transform his body into pure energy.
Yes. And he takes Black Goliath down, and in our final panel, he is about to incinerate Bill Foster, and there is nothing I can do, Black Goliath thinks. Nothing. I also want to say, by the way, that the cover to issue 1 of Black Goliath is terrific.
Oh, absolutely.
The second one is pretty good. The third one, not so much. But
right.
But yeah, good stuff.
So yeah, we transition to issue 2 now. As you said, Claremont takes over as the writer. George Tuska and Vince Colletta are still on the art and the inks.
Yeah, and I also want to say this was a thing that happened kind of on a regular basis in this era, where one writer would sort of develop and launch the series, but would be so busy on other things that then someone would step in after them.
Right.
So we can assume that Isabella at least had some kind of outline for the conclusion of this first story. But Claremont is the credited writer, and he stepped in, and it's clear that he wrote all of the dialogue and captions on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So we open right where we left off. Atom Smasher is about to incinerate Black Goliath. We then get a one-page flashback to everything we just talked about.
Right.
And then the battle takes place.
Yeah. Yeah, we have, Then we have the battle between Black Goliath and Atom Smasher. It is what it is, right? Black Goliath, I like this, rips up the metal floor and uses it to deflect Atom Smasher's attack. They have, and Brian, I wasn't paying that much attention in the previous issue to the ads, but I want to point out that every time I would see the ad for the decals, all the Marvel character stickers that they have.
Oh yeah.
I wanted them all. And I never got them, but I wanted them plastered all over my house. But
I never had the decals, but you know what? We have time to have an aside. Do you remember they came out in 1976 and 1977, the Topps bubblegum card Marvel stickers?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Those were actually my first introduction before I ever bought that fateful issue of Defenders 32.
Oh.
I knew these characters from the stickers. Those were my first introduction to superheroes. And for years could not find those. I lost mine, of course. I guess 2 or 3 years ago, Mary San Giovanni got me a complete set of those stickers.
Oh, look at that.
Yes, I'm with you. I always wanted the decals, never got the decals.
Yeah, there you go. Well, somebody has a collection out there. We'll send Atom Smasher in to steal it.
Yep.
Anyway, all right. There's a fight. The police come.
And the police realize it's important to put the setting. Tony Stark's warehouse is at the LAX airport. And the reason I'm bringing that up is it will affect the plot here in a moment. But yeah, Atom Smasher and Black Goliath continue fighting. The warehouse explodes, and it looks like Black Goliath is in fact dead. Atom Smasher and his men escape, although they did not acquire the radium they so desperately need. They believe that they have killed Black Goliath.
Yeah.
But have they, Chris?
Well, Brian, there would only be 2 issues of this comic if the answer were yes. They have not killed Black Goliath, but he ends up in a ditch that is rapidly filling with the water runoff from the firefighters who are trying to put out this blaze. And he's woken by that water and nearly drowns. But he manages to get out and he is discovered by someone in a car, and he passes out, and in that classic way, which I see still used in TV and movies all the time, he passes out and wakes up in a strange house, a strange home.
Right. Now, here is where Claremont's writing and dialogue really made me wince. I'm just going to fast forward through it for you. It turns out Black Goliath was rescued by one Celia Jackson, who was a flight attendant on Transnational Airways. Transnational Airways, of course, the airline that the Hulk, when separated from Bruce Banner, that's the airplane that he ripped down out of the sky and destroyed, and then landed on the White House lawn and told President Bill Clinton, from now on, every time you attack me, you lose a city. But getting ahead of myself, she happened to be at the airport, rescued Black Goliath, and then we get this page of just 70s dialogue. I want to put, I don't know, Barry White or Teddy Pendergrass or something on in the background here. I mean, the only thing missing is just boom, chicka boom.
Can't get enough of your love, babe. So I'm with you.
Do that again.
No. Anyway, I'm with you because this was a classic moment in this comic for me, because it is TV and movies from this era. So he's just woken up from being knocked out and almost killed, and being in this fight. He probably is pretty stinky and smelly, and was covered in smoke and who knows what else. And she's on the sofa. She's made him coffee. She's flirting with him. He touches her face. She says, "I like your face, my friend." And he hesitatingly says, "I like yours too, lady." And then the last panel on the page says, "Later." So it's clear that they have just had sex.
Yeah,
So she rescued him from a ditch. He was
unconscious. All due respect to Claremont. I love Claremont's writing. His X-Men, his run on Man-Thing, which we're going to talk about next year. Just brilliant stuff. But this is earlier in his career. And honestly, what this reads like to me is Claremont gets handed Black Goliath and goes out and watches Shaft and maybe Hell Up in Harlem, and then tries to write
maybe
that
Dolomite.
Yeah, Dolomite maybe. Yeah.
3 the Hard Way.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I saw all those movies when I was a kid too. I wasn't supposed to be watching them, but I did.
Right. 1 down, 2 to go. I'm listening for that Bum Chicka Wow music in the background.
Yeah.
And I just, but again, I'm not knocking Claremont with that. I mean, I actually love this page because it represents the decade so perfectly.
Exactly.
It was every detective movie, detective series, every mystery novel. The hero is saved by a mysterious woman, and probably has the worst, stinkiest breath and body of all time. And he's just been knocked unconscious. And this happens in, listen, one of my favorite authors, like if I made a list of my top 5 favorite authors, is Walter Mosley.
Right.
And this happens in every Walter Mosley novel at least 3 times. Like constantly. Like, Easy Rollins is near death, but he can still get it up and sleep with this woman he only met 10 minutes ago,
Well, Black Goliath promises Celia that he'll be back. Spoiler alert, we never see Celia again in this comic. But we then transition, back to his penthouse, and Bill Foster, who's finally taken a shower, he's having second thoughts. He thinks maybe he doesn't make it as a superhero. And the dialogue says, "Oh, sure, Black Goliath scored with a fine lady, but how's that going to help you?" He didn't stop Atom Smasher. His boss, Tony Stark, got ripped off. His multi-million-dollar warehouse blown up. he compares himself to Doctor Doom rather than the previous Goliaths.
Yeah. It's a very, it's a very interesting moment because, again, it shows this self-doubt that we're so used to from this era. We go back into Stark International offices, and there's a box, and I love this. I love that written on the outside of the box, one must assume by Tony Stark's Sharpie, is Stark International, top secret, do not open without personal authorization of Tony Stark on pain of instant dismissal. And I feel like the word Acme should be on the side of this box. Anyway, Douche Bro wants to open it anyway. He's arguing with his coworkers, and Bill Foster comes in and tells him, no, nobody is opening this box until Tony Stark tells us to.
One thing we didn't mention about Douche Bro, and
Yeah.
I feel it deserves to be called out. You mentioned that he had red hair. And of course, there's we're not denigrating anyone of the ginger persuasion.
No?
But he not only has red hair, he has that very distinct 70s hairstyle that we refer to as the white man afro, as popularized by, of course, Don Henley of the Eagles.
Yes. Well, as popularized
it looks
in this
like
era by Marjo Gortner, star of Earthquake and Food of the Gods.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like an animal died on top of his head.
Oh, my God. All right, so we get more information about the three amigos here, the Whiz Kids, who are sort of set up in a way and introduced in a way that they're a lot like Doc Savage's sidekicks. And,
Very much
each
so.
have their own specialties, working in the lab, and they're certainly interesting enough. And, then we have Talia is her name, right?
Right.
She gets frustrated. She loses her patience with the research she's doing. And then her associates come in and they sort of help her out. But this is an opportunity to get to know these characters a little bit better, for what it's worth at this point. But
Right.
they come up with something that will help Bill Foster locate his prey.
Yeah, it's like a little flashlight. And when he shines it around, it'll show him the radiation that Atom Smasher is giving off. Because of course, Black Goliath's concern is that Atom Smasher can contaminate all of Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's like Atom Smasher leaves a trail of velvet poster behind him, and this is a black light flashlight.
Right.
I'm keeping it in 70s terms, Brian.
Exactly. So long story short, Black Goliath goes out into the city at night. The device works. He finds Atom Smasher's hideout, and he smashes in.
Yeah, I'm looking back at the. I'm sorry.
Are you looking at the ads again?
I'm looking back at dialogue. And actually, I will say that it's the dialogue is not as stereotypical as I thought when I was reading it.
Yeah.
It's actually just more typical superhero that we get. When Black Goliath attacks Atom Smasher's headquarters, he says, "Thanks to luck, skill, and my fire-resistant long johns here, I am most definitely alive and kicking." And he kicks him. So that's that is more of a superhero stereotype. But he does get into the now baby, it's your turn.
Right.
So it's, I don't know. I guess all respect to Claremont, I preferred Isabella on this.
Oh, I agree. And as I said, I'm a huge Claremont fan. I think probably what's going on here, and you and I both as writers can acknowledge this, Claremont's been handed this character. He's unfamiliar with it. He's trying to figure out who he is. Yeah. And it explains why he talks differently from page to page. Mm-hmm. In this sequence, yes, he sounds more like Spider-Man or maybe Captain America, with the wisecracks versus what we saw earlier.
Yeah, then we have we do get this. It can Babe. He calls Adam Smasher Babe. It's just, that's just 70s all around. But anyway, there's a fight. Adam Smasher turns to pure energy again, but Bill Foster, aka Black Goliath, has a graphite impregnated shield that he cooked up that will hold the energy together. So he's able to at least temporarily trap Adam Smasher. But Brian, there is another threat.
That's right. Because as he's capturing Atom Smasher, the panel transitions and we see Black Goliath caught in the crosshairs of a sniper's infrared scope. And Chris, I have to give a shout out to the lettering here. The lettering is very clear. It's that sound spelled out. I've never seen that in a comic book before, have never seen it since. It's a sound I personally am intimately familiar with. The of a lever action rifle, and we see a sniper shadowed. We don't know his identity.
Are you saying this is you on the roof about to shoot Black Goliath?
Well, I would have been a little young. This was what, 1977? Although I did have a sniper.
Brian
I had a scope in my
Black
gun
Goliath in his crosshairs.
So yeah. So we don't know who this mercenary is, and we don't know who his boss is that he's talking about.
Although it looks like the Kingpin, Brian.
Well, that's what I was going to say. He calls his boss. He says, "Hey, Fats, you listening? You got trouble. Atom Smasher's been rumbled by some black super dude." And we look at his mysterious boss, and yes, it does almost look like Kingpin, except that Kingpin would never be caught dead in this trench coat. And
it does nothing for his figure.
Yeah, he would never let a minion call him Fats.
Correct.
So, but yeah, it's clear to me from the art here that they want us to think perhaps this is Kingpin.
Yes, and if only that had been the case, and they'd had Kingpin on the cover of Black Goliath #3, it might have continued beyond 5 issues.
That's right. But you will find out next week who it is, folks. Spoiler alert, it is not, in fact, Kingpin.
That's very sad. It's very sad, because I will say that the next issue, I'm not a fan. So I'm looking forward to issue 4 when your favorite lame supervillain, Stiltman, arrives in the crossover.
Stiltman is not my favorite lame supervillain.
Are you saying Stiltman is going to be heartbroken when I tell him that you do not love him anymore?
Listeners of this show know that my favorite lame supervillain is from one of the Defenders' main arch enemies. My favorite group of lame supervillains have always been and always will be the Headmen. But Stiltman is up. I love Stiltman in the pages of Daredevil when Turk gets a hold of the Stiltman costume.
Yes, me too.
That's the best incarnation of Stiltman, because Turk is an absolute buffoon. And yes. But anyway,
his own show.
He should. Next week we will finish our coverage with Black Goliath 3, 4, and 5. Then we're going to take a break for the holidays, and when we come back in 2020, for those of you reading along at home, we're going to start with Marvel's Godzilla, which ran 24 issues.
Yeah, get your hands on this. There is an Marvel Essential Godzilla collection out there. So I would say to listeners, I can't say enough about how batshit crazy. And I think that that's the definition of the comics that we cover, right, Brian?
Yeah. I mean, for you kids out there who've always said, yeah, who would win in a fight, Iron Man or Godzilla? You're going to find out, because right. Godzilla actually fights Tony Stark.
The Fantastic Four or Godzilla. The Avengers or Godzilla.
Yeah.
Shield helicarrier or Godzilla. A rat in a sewer or tiny little Godzilla. All of these.
Yeah, it's nuts. So we're going to start with that. Then we're going to transition to one of my favorites from the 70s, supervillain team-up, starring a character who's no stranger to regular listeners of this show, Prince Namor, the Submariner, and his best friend, Dr. Doom.
All right, well, but first, we're going to finish Black Goliath next week, and then after our holiday break, we will be back with Marvel's Godzilla. I can't wait, Brian.
I can't wait either, Chris. Give us a big Excelsior.
I wish I had thought of this. I would have queued up the Godzilla roar and done Excelsior over that, but I guess we'll have to wait until we actually cover Godzilla. So I will say, Excelsior, true believers, and a special shout out to Hank Wagner.
Excelsior to you, baby. We'll see you next week.
You're listening to American Top 40. More tragedy in the news today. Kim Kardashian has a new baby. What the hell? There's nothing good to listen to. Hey, wait, what's this?
You gotta roll that out.
See, it makes me do weird things. I don't like it. God damn it.
I'd be going down on myself?
Shit.
Hey guys, it's Bill,
Mick,
Maya.
and Junior.
from the Unsupervised Podcast.
Check us out every Thursday on the Project Entertainment Network.
Take a break from the stress of the world and come have a laugh with or at us.
Bill.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology featuring short fiction from the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network shows.
Three guys with beards. Jim Moore, Jonathan Maybury, and Chris Golden.
Tom Clark from Necrocast, Igborn.
Brian Keene of The Horror Show. Chuck Buda. And Armand Rosamilia of The Mando Method.
Mary San Giovanni of Cosmic Shenanigans.
Jay Wilburn from Matters of Faith.
John Urbansick of Ink Stains.
Bizung's Mr. Frank.
Available on Kindle and in paperback and through the Project Entertainment Network store.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.